Good afternoon. Welcome to another edition of Facebook Live Kansas City Stars Editorial Board. I'm Toriano Porter. I'm joined by my colleague Dave Helling. And today we have a special guest, Chris Goode, KC Park Board Commissioner and entrepreneur. Chris, thanks for having us.
Thank you for having me.
I should say thanks for joining us. So, Chris, I wanted to jump right into it. You just got off the Zoom conference open session for KC Park Board Commission. You proposed renaming J.C. Nichols Parkway in favor of Martin Luther King, also renaming the fountain, the Dream Fountain. What was that conversation like today?
I think it was a good conversation overall. We got a lot of, I don't know exactly how many people actually weighed in and provided comments, but we had well over 100 attendees to the virtual session, which, I think was a good turnout, especially, from at 2 o'clock on a Wednesday. So I think it really showed that people are invested in this conversation, that it's a valid conversation that we're having. But for the most part, people were supportive of the removal of J.C. Nichols' name from both the Parkway and the fountain.
Now, Chris, this was your proposal. What made you come out so forcefully and put it out there?
Just to be real about it, I just tired of seeing Black people get killed in the streets like animals. To be as frank and raw as I can be, I'm a 35-year-old Black man, and I'm in love with this city. And it's just like this pain inside of me that I think has always been there on some level, but I've learned to navigate around that pain, navigate around the reality of who I am as a Black man and what that means to, whether it be my counterparts or whoever it is. And I'm a person that I'm a millennial, but I don't like to just talk about stuff. I think in the current time, social media becomes this false sense of a voice, and we use our thumbs very, very effectively, but a lot of times our actions don't match that same presence that our thumbs do. And if I take an account of like, Chris, man, who are you? Like, what do you stand for, and how can you create change? I mean, obviously through my business, we've always stood for creating accessibility around healthy foods and making that knowledge more accessible to all people, especially Black people. And now I have this opportunity sitting as a Parks Board Commissioner to impact some level of change. And my role isn't with the bullhorn, standing on the front line of the protests. I support that. I think it holds a very, very important place in this conversation. It has garnered much attention and much action, actionable change. And I think that I just took an audit account and said, what can you do? And every time I heard about this conversation before, it always made sense to me. But then my brain immediately went to, it's not realistic. And I think that when my brain went there again this time under this climate, and seeing Black people being slain in the street constantly over and over and over again, I said, well, yes, it's probably next to impossible. But if I don't at least speak for it, I can't even look my almost 2-year-old son in the eyes. And so I just got tired, and I said, all right, well, I prayed right before I sent the memo. I knew it was going to come with some level of backlash. And I stayed up till 1 a.m. and I poured my heart into the memo, and I meant every single word, and I just let God handle the rest.
Yeah. Right now. No, I was going to say, sorry, Dave. I was going to say, Chris, when I introduced you as an entrepreneur. You're the owner of Ruby Jean's Juicery. How has coming out to rename the J.C. Nichols Fountain and Parkway, how's that affected your business? Or has it affected your business?
I guess I don't know yet. I don't know how broadly known it is. I mean, I think doing things like this makes it more broadly known that I was the person that pushed the ball down the hill. But we've had a fraudulent review. Come across that, during the time where we weren't even open, that just completely, said, oh, it's the rudest people and the worst food that I've ever imagined having, and don't go here. And, I take everything with a grain of salt. We're not perfect. We're not a the best juice bar in the land, but we're pretty good. And so when I see a 1-star review, it raises an eyebrow. You know, I can review our cameras. We don't accept cash at this particular location, so I know who the customers were. So we had a fraudulent review. I've seen a bunch of racial slurs. I've shielded myself from the commentary on many blogs and different things. Just to protect my own mental health and just stay focused on what our intention is here. But I don't, I'm a man of God, and I don't really have a spirit of fear. And if I'm doing what's right, I just lean into that.
Yeah. Chris, let me ask you, I really want to get into the merits of your proposal in a minute and see what the chance of it passing will be. But from the 30,000 foot level, if you will, what you hear from a lot of people, what I get in emails a lot is that changing names of fountains and streets or removing statues are all symbolic measures. They don't really change anything. They don't make the schools better. They don't actually change the police department or address economic disadvantages in some parts of the community. What's your answer to that? Why is this so important?
It's simple. No. Changing the name, taking down a statue, removing honorary,
the tomahawk chop. I wrote a column about the chop out at Arrowhead Stadium and what that implied for some people. And I got email after email from people saying, oh, it doesn't matter. Why are you focused on this? There are more important things. But I think symbolism does mean something.
Right. It absolutely does that. It's not a solution. But typically those people that are providing that narrative, that perspective, they aren't the people that were oppressed by the actions of those people that are being honored. They don't speak from a firsthand experience of walking their two black son through said park or into said building, and they don't have to experience those emotions that are evoked in the people that have been oppressed for such a long time. They don't have the reality of that lineage producing gentrification. They don't have the poor experience that many black people in this very city have had, that they couldn't even approach generational wealth because of that oppression. They don't have to look at their grandfather.
Well, because of J.C. Nichols, right, Chris?
And know that. And hold on, let me finish, David. They don't have to look at their grandfather in the face and know that their grandfather, wouldn't have been welcome to walk anywhere near any of these developments. These are people that speak from a very singular standpoint. We are in America. George Floyd was murdered. I mean, brutally murdered in the street by a coward. And then the next day, the stock market rose. And a lot of the things that brands that are represented on that stock market are symbols. All right. If you look at the stock market, most of those companies have symbols attached. Those symbols mean something to us. If you think of the Kansas City Star, there's a star right here. If that star stood for something bad, we probably wouldn't pick up the paper. We probably wouldn't subscribe. We probably wouldn't walk into Target if we knew that, the CEO of Target did whatever. But there's a symbol attached to things that evoke meaning. They have very, very substantial meaning. And this is one of the most photographed sites in our entire city, if not the most. That's a brand. That's a brand of Kansas City, but that brand doesn't represent every person that pays tax dollars into this city, every person that takes pictures in front of that fountain, every person that drives on that parkway, and it should reflect the collective interests of everybody. And it's pretty simple. Symbols matter. We buy things because of symbols. We want people to buy our city because of a symbol that stands for everybody, not for racism and hatred and divisiveness. It's simple as that.
The way I put it is you need to change the way people think, and you can't change that until you change the way that people learn about their communities over time. And I think that, people are just learning about J.C. Nichols. They think it's the name on the plaza and have no idea, do they, Chris, about the history of the man and the history of his work in this city.
Right. And I agree with the fact that it doesn't change anything, but it starts this dialogue. This dialogue that is a step towards progress.
Right.
And all we're saying is this is just, let's take a step together. Let's take a step, open the dialogue. Let's peel off the scab. Let's pull back the curtain. Let's look at it together, and then let's move forward. And there are so many things that very educated people have put forth to create actionable change and changing systems across the board. But we have to start with not celebrating the names of racist men who stood for no such progress.
Right. Chris, I wanted to ask you, does this process with J.C. Nichols replace the renaming process of the Paseo and how that was supposed to go down? I know the mayor wanted to have open dialogue about the best way to honor Martin Luther King. But is the next step with that?
It's two separate conversations. The J.C. Nichols removal is really the only thing that we're focused on right now, just the removal of his name. We're not even to the step of actually renaming it. That will take a much broader input from the city's perspective. But right now we're focused on removing J.C. Nichols' name from those assets. As it relates to Paseo and Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., that is a wound in our city currently. And we've had sessions planned, literally 5 sessions planned around the entire city in order to hear from the city and what is the appropriate measure to take to honor Dr. King appropriately. It's not J.C. Nichols Parkway. That's a foregone conclusion. We're beyond that. It's more so now, what is that appropriate measure that is of the appropriate valor to honor such a man of such prestige? So it's two separate conversations. This J.C. Nichols conversation is truly a step towards approaching equality, merely approaching. The Dr. King versus Paseo conversation, it wasn't necessarily about equality. It had an undertone of that because of what Dr. King stands for, but it wasn't about people getting senselessly slain and murdered week after week, video after video in the street. This is in direct response to what our action should be as a Kansas City, Missouri Parks and Rec Board, to take some stance and say, you know what, this is not what we stand for. And if we need to look back into the history to make that very plain, then let's do that. And that's me pushing that ball down the hill. I can't speak for the entire board. I hope and pray that they are with me. But we will see.
What can I just quickly, if you take the name off of the Parkway, what do you replace it with if it isn't Dr. King?
I think it would be something ambiguous. The
Broadway,
one that,
I mean, it's an extension of Broadway, isn't it, Chris? You could call it Broadway.
It is. We've heard that. I think at this point, what we would likely see happen is Mill Creek Parkway and Mill Creek Fountain, just as a placeholder, something that's truly ambiguous. It was called that prior to. So we revert back to that as a temporary measure to then say, you know what, we don't want to weigh in on the name. I think Dream Fountain is a great name, but me, Chris Goode, that's just my limited thinking. I think it speaks to everybody, but then I can't push that forth over an entire city because I'm not the only person that's going to go out to that fountain and take a picture or run along that pathway. So then the name is more of a widespread. Okay, we've got these 3 to 5 responses consistently. Let's weigh them out, and then let's take it to a citywide vote.
I get that, but isn't that one of the problems in the Paseo controversy? Because when you say, let's name a street for Dr. King, everybody has a good idea of where that might be. Some people, oh, it's Prospect. Oh, it's Truce. No, the Paseo. No, J.C. Nichols Parkway. And then there is no consensus, and then nothing gets done. I mean, I think that's what the fear is. You hear a lot is everybody's got an idea. None of them are perfect. So it's just hard to decide on one that everyone can agree on.
You know, Dave, we're never going to get to a consensus on any street renaming, period.
Right.
That's a foregone conclusion. The thing that we want to focus on is these are 2 separate scenarios, completely separate. Dr. King and Paseo, that's one thing. And we have a plan in place to say we want to hear from the public on what are those suggestions. And then with these top answers and the blessing of his family and the SCLC as a forerunner in that charge, leading that charge, we want to do what's equitable to everybody involved, but make sure that his family and the SCLC organization that he founded has the appropriate position in that conversation. Now, that with that aside, JC Nichols is a completely different scenario.
Yeah, it's interesting.
We are focused solely on the removal of his name currently. What it becomes, the problem with that conversation and this conversation is that there was a feeling that there was transparency, there wasn't equity in that process. This renaming process is very clear. It's very clear cut. It's concise. There's no mistake about it. It is the Parks Board's discretion to make this decision. But in that 30-day period, before we even get to a renaming portion, we want to make sure that we've heard the public through and through. And I think we've done that pretty extensively. We've sent out press release through every channel possible. I personally have used my platform to send out, information about the public input sessions. We've just finished the second one today. We've garnered well over, I think at this point, 1,700 or maybe even 2,000 signatures in support of renaming. So at this point, we want to do what's right, because what you see happen, Dave, when you see a black man get killed in the street and then you see no decisive action,
right? That
won't happen with this. And this is a statement to say, you know what? That's not right. And we can't control every single bad apple in the police department, but we can start a conversation about doing what's right and representative of black people. And that first step is taking that man's name down. That's the only thing that even matters at this point, because that's the statement, and we do it right now.
And right now, I mean, if you let it linger, if you let it stretch out, it gets harder and harder, because suddenly, well, I don't want to do that. Let's do something else. And then all the momentum disappears.
Exactly. So that's what our focus is solely. Remove his name immediately. If it were legal and I could do it, I would go out there and do it right now, Dave. But I can't do that. So we're going to wait until we have our Parks Board meeting on Tuesday. We're going to vote, and we went through the legal appropriate process. We've done the history research on the fountain, the parkway, and every facet, no stone unturned here. Right. But our goal is to make a swift and decisive stand in the face of hatred immediately.
Right. Hey, Chris, what was your reaction? It appeared on our paper, the Star's website, to JC Nichols' grandson coming out and saying that he did what he had to do, quote unquote.
You know what? That was I think that spoke to the issue very effectively. I think that only enhanced the reasoning. I mean, he said that one line that really stuck out to me. He said, like the black athletes say, it is what it is. What black athletes said that first, and then what is what it is? Racism is what it is because it happened back in that day. So my granddaddy couldn't walk over there because it is what it is. My generations have been oppressed because it is what it is. We haven't had the opportunity to attain generational wealth because it is what it is. I can't, because I'm a Negro, I couldn't buy a piece of property because it is what it is. And your family, the entire lineage have profited on the blacks and the oppression of black people. And now we talk about gentrification as if it's this new thing. And really, JC Nichols created it. It is what it is. I agree. It is what it is. Let's take his name down.
Now, this is Facebook Live, so we have live comments. One person took exception to your comment. So what she said was, or they said, renaming the street isn't about equality. It's about not glorifying races in our history. I respond to that.
Both are true. It's not about glorifying racists in our history, but it is about equality. Because if we are glorifying racists in our history that oppress black people, then that is a conversation towards equality. So one is not the truth and the other is a lie. Both are the truth.
Thank you.
Do you think, Chris, that a year from now we'll still be having this conversation? I mean, we've been talking about this literally, I think, since 2018. So that, the broad idea of honoring Dr. King, where and how. And here we are 2.5 years later. Will we be still? I've never seen Kansas City wrestle harder with an issue that seems so clear cut in some ways.
Dave, I think you're confusing what the topic is at hand, and maybe I'm confused. Yeah. It's not about honoring Dr. King's legacy. That's not what this conversation is about. This statement is about what needs to be done in Kansas City to revoke the celebration of outwardly known racism in our history. This isn't so. No, I don't think that we're talking about this a year removed from now. If I have anything to do with it, I'm newly appointed, and I'm Dave. all I can be is who I am. I'm real. You know, I'm not going to sugarcoat anything. If I have anything to do with it, no, we won't be talking about either one of these topics a year from now. We will be moving on to the actual work that needs to be done to create true equality, changing systems, police reform, things of that nature that really, really matter. This is, in my opinion, this is a foregone conclusion. You shouldn't celebrate races, not when all people pay tax dollars into this city. That this really is, it should be a very simple conversation. And the fact that it is such a contentious, difficult conversation speaks exactly to just how deeply embedded racism is into the fabric of not only this city, but this country.
Right. And of course, the corollary to that then is if it's this hard to do this little, imagine how hard it's going to be to do what, you know, you really need to do. Police, you mentioned, education, housing, access to capital, credit, infrastructure repairs. I mean, I've been a reporter in Kansas City since the mid 80s, and it's astonishing to me that we still wrestle with these issues, although, you know, racism is embedded in our city, just like it is in most places. But I think one of the reasons I'm so interested in the debate over the fountain and the Parkway and Paseo is because that would seem to be the easiest first step. And if it's this hard, imagine how hard these other things are going to be.
Yeah, I guess I would just say, imagine how hard it is to be Black in America.
Yeah.
I mean, that's
no question.
We you know, it's not. This isn't just about Black people, but if I can't speak from the standpoint of being a Black man, then I'm not doing myself any justice. But it's hard to be Black in America, Dave. So yeah, I can imagine how hard that this will be, how hard that every single day has been in Black skin. But just because it's difficult doesn't mean that it's not necessary.
Chris, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you out, sir. Before we let you get out of here, I just wanted to ask you, this is a appointed position. When you signed up for it, did you have any idea what you were getting into?
No. Short answer, no, I did not. You know, I got a passion for making kids healthier, making the city a healthier place. And I know that parks and the discretion therein has a good deal of access towards making this a healthier city. I think that even this work that we're talking about now, it makes this a healthier city. So it falls in line with my passion, but I had no clue that, you know, I'm a business person. It does me no benefit to speak about anything controversial. Our customer is diverse in every single way. We have the most diverse customer base surrounding a healthy concept than has ever existed in the history of this city. So it doesn't benefit me to speak out about controversy, but I gotta be who I am authentically, and I gotta speak to what I know is real and what I know is right. What's right is right, and what's wrong is wrong. And if it's this hard to see, it really just shines a light that this is a very important conversation. And I'm grateful to have the opportunity to just be a part of impacting some kind of actionable change. And no, street names and monument changes don't fix anything. They don't change the hearts of racist people, but they certainly open a very, very important dialogue, just like we're having now, to get towards, okay, we hear you, we feel your pain, we know what, when you see that racist man's name day in and day out, what kind of emotion it evokes. If you can't hear the passion in my voice, then I don't know if you're listening right. But this isn't a game. This is not a game. It has never been a game for Black people, and it's time that we wake up collectively and do what's right for everybody, not just for Black people, but for everybody. Kansas City is an amazing city for all of us to live in. All of our children live here, not just my children or your children, all of our children. We have to make this a city that we hand to them that in some way has removed the celebration of racist men and moved us forward in a way that is progressive and uniting, and it just makes Kansas City amazing.
Yeah. Can I just quickly say, Toriano, one of the things I've said to people who write me and say, "Oh, this is symbolic, it doesn't matter," is, if it didn't matter, why are you fighting so hard to protect it? I mean, exactly. if it was meaningless, then you wouldn't care. And so it's not meaningless in any possible way, but it is, I think, Chris, as you pointed out, just the first step in an important long journey.
But see, the bigger thing, and I know we're trying to close, but the bigger thing about this is that we're at the heart of the country. And these practices, this blueprint, it didn't just say, okay, we're going to do this here and we'll stop in Prairie Village and Brookside and the Plaza. There are cities segregated today because of this blueprint. The government adopted these practices. So this is not some small conversation. It's not a solution, but this is something that has impacted our entire nation. The very, very structure of that nation. And Black people, Jewish people, Hispanic people, and so on and so forth have been oppressed for decades. And it's time that we say, okay, this is a tipping point. This is we hear you, we feel you. What can we do? Well, first, let's stop celebrating these racist men that created the oppression, and then let's move forward to actionable change. And we don't have enough time to go into all the details of what that looks like, but I think we know some areas.
Been a great conversation, Chris. Thank you.
You bet.
Thank you for coming on. Very passionate.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, keep
and
doing.
Good luck to you. And if you read your local newspaper, Chris, the editorial board is in your corner on all of this stuff.
All right.
We want to see it happen as quickly as maybe you do.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
You bet.
Once again, Toriano Porter, Dave Helling, our special guest today, Chris Goode, Commissioner, entrepreneur here in Kansas City. Thank you. And thank you guys for joining us. We'll be in touch.